My name is Peter Young, and I want to welcome you to this Yale Career Discussion Town Hall. And this is a very special one because we have a different format. What we have is we have four panelists, and each of us will take 5 minutes to just share each of our thoughts about the impact of the pandemic and on careers and also on their work life. And then we will, at the end of the 20 minutes, we're going to open it up to discussion, and we'll all end up at tables, have a really chance to really talk directly with each other. We hope this is a different and a good experience for everyone. The four panelists here, we have quite a diverse panel in terms of both profession, gender, and ethnicity, and many other dimensions. So we hope that's helpful. But we all also happen to be the coordinating team that runs the Yale Career Panels. So what I'd like to do is we're going to do this in alphabetical order by last name. And so I'm going to ask Justin to start. And if you could stay with the 5 minutes, but also make sure you take a little time in the beginning and explain what you do so they have the right context. Justin?
Thank you, Peter. Gosh, what do? I don't know. It seems to involve a lot of emails and meetings. I'm head of digital products at TED, the folks behind TED Talks. And I think from my perspective, the pandemic has been an incredible accelerant for really everything involved in careers, in hiring, in work happening, in promotions. Let's start with hiring as an example. It used to be that it could take maybe a month, 2 months to hire a software engineer, a product manager, a designer, a data analyst. And now it takes maybe 3 weeks. There's no flying someone out for in-person meetings. And there's an expectation of velocity because every other employer is also not having any travel. And people who are doing the interviews are not going to conferences anymore. They're not traveling. And so the expectation has become that each round happens really within a couple of days of the previous round. We've had candidates where we can't even do a week-long process before they get offers from other employers and have a week to decide whether to take them or not and drop out. So the pandemic has been this really kind of insane accelerant for people looking for new roles in the software internet industry of any sort. And then once you're in a role, it's actually had a similar effect where projects are expected to happen faster. Again, no one is going to conferences, no one is traveling, and so the expectation of availability has really been a double-edged sword, I would say. And the advantage is that for folks who are doing well, we've also seen promotions accelerate. And something that maybe used to take 2 or 3 years to get to the next level now could maybe happen in 6 or 12 months. And there's much more visibility, I think, for high performers. So as the world begins to reopen, it's not clear how much of this will remain. People are going to start to travel more. They're going to start going to conferences again. That will impact the scheduling of things like interviews or the scheduling of work for people who are in a role. But I think that some of these expectations are likely to persist. I will stop there in the interest of time. Who is next? Alphabetical last name.
Okay, Julie, you're next. And by the way, she is currently in Korea, so she is dealing with a very different time zone than we are.
Yeah, it's currently 9 a.m. here. It's not too bad, but my name is Julie Sohn. I recently graduated from MBA at University of Michigan, and now currently taking some time off before I start my full-time at McKinsey this fall in New York. From my perspective, I think the pandemic has affected in 3 different areas. One being academic, second being recruiting, and then third being social. So just to clarify, the pandemic only affected me mostly in my second year. So in academic wise, I have already gotten a really good experience taking classes in person and doing a lot of in-class discussions in my first year, but which I was missing in my second year elective courses. In terms of recruiting, though, I think echoing what Justin was saying, I think the positive aspect is that you don't need to actually even step out of the city or even your room to get a job offer, because you can do all the interviews in your room or within the interview rooms at the school. So I think that's definitely the pro, but you're missing out, meeting people in person and really filling out the culture of the company that you can only get when you visit the firm. From the social aspect, we are definitely missing out a lot of partings or the social happy hours that MBA students do. But I think in contrary, you're actually able to focus your time with a closer set of friends. So from my perspective and from my friends' perspective, I think a lot of people have actually formed a really close set of friends and network from this past year.
Well, Julie, I think it's safe to say that in recruiting, no one can discriminate based on height, right?
Yeah, that too. Just gotta look really good on screen.
No, you have to look. You have to look at the positive sides of this, right? Right?
Yes. Yeah.
So anyway, Trish, the impact of the pandemic on careers in the legal side, but also the work life.
So my name is Trish Takemoto, and I'm a legal assistant at Friedman and Wittenstein, which is we do mostly litigation in Midtown Manhattan. So the first thing is working from home. If anyone has lived in New York, you know how small New York apartments are. So carving out a space for only work is really difficult. And prior to the pandemic, I obviously had a computer at home, and if there was some emergency, I could work from home. But now to work full time from home, it's a whole different set of rules. I mean, your space is so constricted, and as you know, lawyers generate a lot of paper. And still, a lot of it's online, but they still generate a lot of papers. And I'm still the old school. I have to print something out and read it, actually. It's much easier for me that way. So it's really difficult. It's an ongoing problem, actually. And as organized as you can be, your space limitations is just, you can't get around it. It is what it is. And continuing with that is also, if you have to buy new equipment, I'm fortunate my firm paid for, a new printer and a new camera and things. So I didn't have to, that was not an expense for me. But it's just, so that is something that has to be considered. The extra cost for someone. And also when you're at home, there's no set hours. It's really, which I also find with, some of the attorneys, they will email me at 8 o'clock at night, which would not happen before. So some boundaries are being crossed. Not often, they do not abuse it, but more often than in the past. So that is kind of difficult. And also just during the day, if I am working, I do get interrupted at times for, other things to deal with my boyfriend, and because he has health problems. So that is something that is definitely harder to deal with. Socially speaking, it's harder also, I cannot go down the hall and talk to an attorney if I have a question about a project. I have to email them and type something out. So that's different. And I assume for other law firms like associates and partners, you can't just go down the hall and bounce ideas off someone. It becomes much more difficult to deal with different ideas you may have about a case, which may or may not fly. You have to make an appointment to talk to someone. So that's difficult. So that's hard to deal with, all of that. But we're managing. I just have to be more organized. Anyway, that's it for me.
So I'm Peter Young, and I am the CEO of an investment banking boutique firm. We do financings, M&A, et cetera, for both life science and chemical companies around the world. So now, first on the question of the impact of the work life issue of the pandemic, it's very interesting because certain parts of investment banking, the impact was relatively modest, right? Because you work on things individually anyway. You were on phones and so forth. And in our case, we used video conferencing before the pandemic, so it wasn't as big an issue. But it really varies according to what part of investment banking you're in, because different parts have very different dynamics in terms of what you have to do physically and with other people in order to get your job done. Certainly, for example, I can pick two things that clearly were negatively affected in the M&A world. One is, how do you help a client do due diligence on a business if you're trying to buy them, right? If you have a business with a plant in Minnesota, how do they do that part of the due diligence or to negotiate? The other, and I think the most significant part is, and I think this is true not only in investment banking, but it's also true in R&D and so forth, is that I think there's a certain element of creativity and interaction that is lost if you're not in person. So I think people definitely feel that's true in many different professions. There's a certain, and I think Trish was referring to that, there's a certain dynamic between other people that you kind of lose even if you have a Zoom session. So, for example, in my firm, one of the things we do is if we're working on a particularly difficult or challenging problem that we think requires creativity, then the team members make sure they get together in person because they just find that's the best way to solve the problem. So I do think that there's been a lot of disruption in investment banking. It varies according to your job. If you're in trading, it's a very different dynamic than if you're in sales or you're in corporate finance or M&A. But I think in the end, it's really going to have a long-term impact, because one thing that's for sure is that I think the people running investment banks have learned now through this process that a lot of things don't require people to be in the office. Certainly a lot of the back office people don't have to be in the office to do their job. But then so you'll find that a lot of firms will still have in person, but they'll have a chunk of their business that will still be from home. The big dark side, though, is what we're seeing with all these hacking and so forth. Because if you thought it was hard to protect computers if everyone is in the office, just think how hard it has been if people are scattered in their homes. Because certainly, I will tell you, the security in Trish's apartment is not the same as in her office. So that's something that I think, particularly investment banking firms, where a lot of the stuff is sensitive, they're going to have to deal with that. So in summary, I think, one, there's been a big impact, but it varies according to what part of investment banking. Two, there is no question that it's going to have a permanent effect. But of course, even before the pandemic, technology was rearranging the investment banking world. So, for example, independent of COVID-19, the whole job of being a broker, dealing with clients with all this AI, automated stock picking and so forth, by itself is devastating certain parts of investment banking, independent of COVID. So we're going to see a lot of that as well. So I guess any further comments? Oh, by the way, any votes as to when people are going to end up going to concerts and going to conferences and so forth? That's a big question, right? Justin, what's your view? I guess you have a selfish interest in the answer to that question, right?
We're betting on August. So our first big conference is in California in August. So hopefully August is the right answer.
And
Trish,
hopefully California will be open.
Trish, court systems and all that stuff that your firm deals with?
They've been all the conferences, and hearings have been via Zoom, and I think the Southern District of New York may. I think they've been having, bench trials, which means only judges, no juries. They may start up the jury trials in the fall, but I'm not sure if that's going to happen or not, because obviously logistics for that, dealing with trying to pick a jury and having massive amounts of people come down to the Southern District Courthouse is really, really difficult, or going down to the state Supreme Court downtown. It's the logistics of keeping everyone safe is going to be very difficult. So.
And Julie, McKinsey has famous for all of its conferences and so forth, which kind of stopped. So what are they saying in terms of restarting their conferences and events?
I haven't heard much in terms of what McKinsey is up to in resuming to in-person. I think it really depends on what kind of clients that you're working with. I do know that a lot of the offices are open, so you can go in, but at a very limited capacity. And then on the MBA side, I know a lot of schools are resuming to in-person education this fall.
Oh yeah, I know many schools, they're saying in-person and they're requiring vaccination, right?
Yeah, correct.
So Julie, when did you start partying? When do you expect to start partying again? Or did you already started? No?
I think all the people have already started after the vaccination happened.
Yeah. Well, so I think we finished our 20-minute just round robin discussion. So what I'm going to do, and for those of you who are attendees, what I'm going to do is I'm going to push a little button here that says end session, and we're all going to end up at a bunch of tables. And feel free to go to whatever table you wish. Each of the four of us have a table that is labeled for us, but if there aren't that many people, we'll all converge on Julie's table, right? So, all right, so we'll all see you, and we'll be chatting with you in about a couple of seconds.